420, be a reefer. Now that we've got your attention, we want to talk about something a little bit more serious. Coral reefs worldwide are facing challenges, unprecedented challenges. Lots of corals are actually going extinct. There's a disease process that's going on in the Florida Reef Tract. We're fortunate to be working with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums and several other government agencies and conservation agencies to try to save these corals. We just received the first shipment of corals that were pulled out of the reefs to try to save them from the bacterial disease that's going down through the chain, and we'll be receiving more as we go further along into the spring. Ideally, these corals will be saved in our aquariums for the next 2 to 3 years, and then they'll be transplanted back out to the reefs. So in 2014, there was a disease process identified in the Florida Reef Tract. That's a very large reef system that runs from Port St. Lucie on the Atlantic coast all the way down to the Dry Tortugas past the Florida Keys. The disease process initially was not really identified, but now they think that it is more associated with a bacteria. It results in about 50 to 90% mortality in most of the species, the 55 species of stony corals that make up that reef system. So in 2017 and 2018, when the monitoring really showed that this was a crisis that really needed to be dealt with, Moody Gardens, as an Association of Zoos and Aquariums member, was one of many zoos and aquariums that stepped up to receive corals out of the environment and maintain them over 2 to 3 years before they could be put back into the environment. Because we have a facility that is isolated from the rest of our collection, everything in here is artificial seawater. We don't have any biological transmission back and forth to the rest of our collection. We're essentially a sterile lab in this environment. We were one of the main facilities chosen on the early part of this response. Coral reefs, tropical coral reefs, are a really intricate environment, highly dynamic, very biodiverse. They're a combination of the corals themselves, which are animals, but they're structure-forming animals. They create these large habitat features. The coral reef systems themselves actually are storm barriers, so they create a barrier for storm surge coming in. They're also a refuge for all of the invertebrates and fishes that live within the coral reef. And as this really dynamic ecosystem, they also serve as a food source to a lot of other fisheries that are commercially viable and recreational fisheries. So coral reef systems are a really important piece of the ecosystem. They're an economic driver for tourism. As these coral reefs disappear, it's really going to have a profound effect on not only Florida, but the rest of the world. Quick and easy things that our guests can do to get involved in conservation of not just coral reefs, but the ocean overall. Really be mindful of your use of plastics. If it's a one-time use plastic, ask yourself if you really need it. If you do, make sure it stays out of the environment when you're done with it. Reef-safe sunscreen is a big one as we go into the summer season. There's chemicals in most sunscreens that are actually detrimental and somewhat toxic to the corals. So be aware of the products that you might be introducing into the water. And if you are in an area that has a coral reef system up close to the shore where you might be in the water, be careful not to touch the corals. They're very susceptible to being bruised and damaged by physical contact. So as you're walking around the coral reef systems or swimming or snorkeling around them, just be aware of what you're doing.